Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lord Gord Podcast. This is your host, Lord Gord. I'm giving you information that's factually correct and politically incorrect. And I know we come from worlds apart. I know I've seen it in your heart. It's been there from the start. My actions reveal the love that I feel for you. I love my listeners. Oh, so nice, so cuddly, so exciting. So this week, I told you I was going to bust some fake news on these teachers. My mother handed me this magazine from Fake News Time magazine, who lied on President Trump, by the way, about illegal immigration and how he was separating kids at the border, even though that was what Obama was doing and virtually every other country does. So I'm going to bust this fake news story. I'm going to read some passages from it. I've got my facts and evidence to debunk everything that they're saying. And basically I'm going to show you that everything that teachers in the educational establishment says is a lie in order to get more power, to acquire more resources, and to dictate the lives of other people. So here we go. Here's the cover of Fake News Time magazine. Little chubby Hispanic says, "My child and I share a bed in a small apartment, and I spend $1,000 on supplies, and I've been laid off 3 times due to budget cuts. I'm a teacher in America." So by this, we don't know if this is an anomaly. We don't know if this is commonplace. They say the child and I share a bed in a small apartment. We don't know where she lives. I mean, I see her shirt. It says RFK Community Schools. Those are some commie schools in LA. They have a school of social justice for elementary school students. And if you checked out my podcast on this, it says social justice. You know that social justice is communism, socialism, totalitarianism, big brother government dictating the lives of millions of people, so on and so forth. So that's the kind of stuff they push in these schools. We hear nothing about a father. It's a child and I. Where's the father? You spend $1,000 on supplies. When? Where? So there's so much information you don't have here. But let's go into the article and it's called The Life of an American Teacher. So I'm going to read some passages from this. The pay gap between teachers and other comparatively educated professionals is now the largest on record. In 1994, public school teachers in the U.S. earned 1.8% less per week than comparable workers, according to the Economic Policy Institute, a left-leaning think tank. I don't even know what comparable workers is. They don't say what comparable worker is. By last year, they made 18.7% less. The situation is particularly grim in states such as Oklahoma, where teachers' inflation-adjusted salaries actually decreased by about $8,000 in the last decade to an average of $45,245 in 2016. Arizona teachers' inflation-adjusted annual wages are down $5,000. Well, they're pretending like they're victims. Well, I can't move there. They're pretending like they're victims, but the cold hard fact. This is the cold hard fact. Okay. Cold hard fact is they make more than the per capita income in the United States, or at least those teachers make about the average. So GDP per capita in the United States, $46,588. So they make about, those teachers in particular make about $1,000 less than the average GDP of the United States. These people are not victims by any measure. And as they're saying that their salaries are decreasing, notice they're not mentioning anything about productivity or results. So you're supposed to think that they're doing an excellent job, yet their wages are going down, and this is some proof of a malignant evil, the fact that we don't care about teachers. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but the fact of the matter is that most government school teachers are not very good. So, here's another quote from it about the teachers. "They have sought to remind the public that they are on the front lines of America's frayed social safety net." You mean the one that spends billions of dollars annually on bastard children and their irresponsible mothers? Frayed social safety net. It's funny how they put social, even though it's dictated by a small, concentrated elite. It's dictated by big government. So social safety net would be like a church or some voluntary center, so on and so forth. But this is all big government programs that are unconstitutional. Yet they're talking about they're in the front line. Okay, let's continue. Dealing with children is affected by the opioid crisis, living in poverty, and fearful of the next school shooting. Recent polling suggests teachers have the public on their side. Nearly 60% of people in an Ipsos USA Today survey released September 12th think teachers are underpaid, while a majority of both Republicans and Democrats believe they have a right to strike. See, they say they believe that teachers are underpaid, not that they actually are underpaid. See? I can tell you, I used to be a teacher. Most people think it's like axiomatic. People think without even looking at the evidence, without asking compared to what, they'll say teachers are underpaid. In this article itself, it says that the average teacher is paid, average salary for a public school teacher is, how do they have this chart, but it says the highest is about $79,600 in New York. That's $80,000. That is a lot. That's a really good salary to be working in a government school, because you have to realize that oftentimes government school teachers get paid more than private school teachers. One, because the school districts don't have to economize, and they use the taxpayers as hosts for their parasitic ways. And the fact of the matter is, the private schools are leaner because they actually have to allocate resources effectively. If they don't do that, if they don't produce, they get eliminated. So those are the reasons why. And also, the government school teachers are unionized, and those unions are deep in cahoots with the Democrat Party, so they raise incredible amounts of money, give to the candidates that are going to give them free stuff, on and on and on and on, and they live at your expense until they're dead. Not only do they live at your expense when they're actually teaching, but when they retire, they get what are called pensions, and their pensions are literally funded by taxpayers. So literally, you are a slave to them for the rest of their lives. It's horrifying. And the lowest average teacher salary is $42,700 in South Dakota. So the estimated average in total is $58,950. If you can remember correctly, that's about $10,000 more than the average per capita income in the United States, than the per capita income. So these people are crying poverty, yet they're making $55,000, $60,000 a year. To be in the top 20% of American households, you have to make $84,000. That's household income. So literally, if two teachers marry each other, two average government school teachers marry each other, they will have a household income over $100,000. Does that sound like poor to you? Does it? I mean, if it does, I have some real estate in Atlantis I would love to sell to you. I have some real estate in Shangri-La I'd love to show you. All right? Okay. Let's look at this one. Like most stories, the fight over teacher pay has many shades of gray. Generous retirements and health benefit packages negotiated by teachers' unions in flusher times are a drain on many states. Yes, if I remember correctly, in a few years, like a majority of the LAUSD budget is going to go towards pensions. But that's because governments are horrible allocators of scarce resources which have alternative uses. If you put a school district in charge of a lake, it'd run out of water. If you put the government in charge of a Sahara desert, it'd run out of sand. If you put the government in charge of a chicken coop, you would run out of chickens. Okay? Because they do not have the incentives of profit and losses to guide them towards productive behaviors, economic behaviors, and to deter them from uneconomic, consequential behaviors. So that's why you will even see in studies with charter schools and public schools, the charter schools will get better grades on average, yet they spend less per pupil. So I'm going to bust that narrative in a bit that shows that per capita spending has absolutely nothing to do with academic success. So let's read about Nashonda Cook. Man, listeners, I think she's Chinese. Nashonda Cook? That sounds pretty Chinese to me. She is a middle school teacher, and let's read her story. Utility companies do not care that you had a great day with one of your students. They don't care if you're coaching the soccer team. They want you to pay for the services that they provide you. Yes, because they do not run on charity, says Nashana Cook, a teacher and single mother of 2 in Raleigh, North Carolina. They never talk about how she's a single mother. I'll put it to you like this. 77% of blacks are born out of wedlock. 70% grow up in single mother homes. If she's a single mother, and she likely is one by having these babies out of wedlock, if she's a widow, I'll feel bad for her. If not, I don't. I can't tell you how many letters I got this summer that said final notice. Cook, who makes about $69,000 a year, often skips doctor's appointments to save the copay and worries about paying for her eldest daughter's college education. It's not about wanting a pay raise or extra income, she says. It's about wanting a livable wage. You hear the nonsense that comes out of her mouth. It's not about wanting a pay raise or extra income. It's about wanting a livable wage. So you're saying that $69,000 a year is not livable? Compared to what? Compared to what? $69,000 is well above the national average per capita GDP. Almost $20,000 more. You literally marry a man that makes $20,000 a year. You're in the top 20% of household income. Yet you're talking about living wage. If it's not about getting paid more or extra income, what is this living wage? How is that not your living wage? It literally makes no sense. When my mom showed me this article, my head almost exploded by the lack of logic. And also the lack of awareness. These teachers are trying to paint themselves as victims when they're getting paid $69,000, $70,000 a year. Teachers in Chicago average get paid $70,000 a year. Shortest classroom times on average. Horrible results, horrible test scores. $70,000 a year, and you're trying to cry poor? This is why people are turning against the Democrats. This is why people are turning against these government monopolies, these teachers. This is why people want to homeschool their kids. They want more charter schools, more independent schools. Because you have brain-dead morons like this crying about making $69,000 a year. The cold hard fact is that the public does not owe you a living. The public does not owe you the kind of money that you want in order to live the lifestyle that you want. You get paid based on what you're worth. You get paid on your production. You get paid based on supply and demand. $69,000 a year. You're richer than 99% of the history of humans in the history of humanity. Yet you're talking about how you can barely make ends meet. What kind of money are you spending? I mean, Michael Jackson was making millions of dollars a year, yet he was broke. It wasn't because he was literally broke. It was because he spent far more money than what was coming in. You are a horrible allocator of resources because you work in government. Governments are not efficient allocators of resources. So now I'm going to give you some facts about the lies and the myths that these teachers say. They say, oh, the schools are underfunded. The reason why the kids don't succeed is because we don't have money. Nonsense. Since 1970, I'm going to put this chart up on YouTube. The Cato Institute tracked total cost for a K-12 education of a single student graduating in the given year. So in 1970, it costed $57,602. In 2010, it costed $164,426. And these are constant 2013 dollars. So literally, the cost of educating a kid from K through 12 increased about 185% from 1970 to 2010. And then you ask, if the spending increased by 180%, did the grades increase dramatically? No. When you look at reading scores, math scores, and science scores, there's basically no change. Okay, when you look at enrollment actually was going down until around 1999. Then there was a slight uptick from where it was in 1970. When you look at employees, the amount of employees increased by about 98% from 1970 to 2010. So in this chart, you see the bureaucracy is getting bigger. The amount of spending is increasing dramatically, such as college and vocational training. The U.S. spent $15,171 per each young person in the system, more than any other nation compared to in the report. We spend more than anyone and get horrible results. Okay? All right. The U.S. spent more than the average country. We spent 7.3% of our GDP on education compared to 6.3% on average for other countries in the survey. Denmark topped the list with 8% of its GDP going towards education. Okay? Spending only tells part of the story and does not guarantee student success. The United States routinely trails its rival countries in performances on international exams despite being among the heaviest spenders on education. The Program for International Student Assessment Measurement found that the U.S. ranked 31st in math literacy among 15-year-old students and below the international average. The same 2009 test found that the U.S. ranked 23rd in science among the same students, posting an average score. Okay? Average first-year high school teacher in the U.S. makes about $38,000. OECD nations pay their comparable educators just more than $31,000. So, listeners, I hope you guys understand by just reading off some of these facts. These teachers are not underpaid. They only work 9 months out the year because they get usually 2 to 3 weeks for winter break. They get 2 months for summer, 2 to 3 months for summer. They get a week for Thanksgiving break. They get full medical and dental coverage for themselves and their families. And they make well above the national average in per capita income. And people like to say, oh, they make less than their peers when it comes to education. Different skills command different wages. Different skills are more valuable than others. It's like saying, hey, I went to school for 5 years to study anthropology. That guy went to school for 5 years to study computer science. Yeah, he makes $30,000 more than me. That's not fair. No, computer science is in demand and there are valuable skills which employers are willing to pay for, and your skills are not what they're willing to pay for. So you can't compare salaries based on years of education. You have to compare them based on what they got educated in and what the value of that education is on the free market. And also, there's even some dribble in this article. This fake news time article talking about how sexism might be at play, why teachers get paid so little. But in the same article, they mention that nurses get paid an average of $75,000 a year. And that's a lot more in other male professions, electrician, janitor, so on and so forth. So, where's the sexism there? Of course, they never have to answer these questions because they're brain dead leftists. Okay, so let's, before I finish, let's mention just how bad some of the education is. Some of the teachers are. This is from a Walter E. Williams column. Recently, New York, after being tied up in courts for years, dropped its teacher literacy test amid claims of racism. I'll tell you, I took the CBEST to be a sub-teacher. It is literally 8th grade work. I was insulted by how easy it was. And I'm going to tell you just how bad these teachers are. A 2011 investigation by WSB-TV found that more than 700 Georgia teachers had repeatedly failed at least one portion of the certification test they were required to pass before receiving a teacher's certificate. Nearly 60 teachers had failed the test more than 10 times, and one teacher had failed the test 18 times. There were 297 teachers on the Atlanta school system's payroll who had failed the state certification test 5 times or more. More stuff from Walter E. Williams. With but a few exceptions, schools of education represent the academic slums of colleges. They tend to be home to students who have the lowest academic test scores. For example, SAT scores when they enter college. They also tend to have the lowest scores when they graduate and choose to take postgraduate admission tests such as the GRE, the MCAT, and the LSAT. Professors at schools of education tend to have the lowest levels of academic respectability. American education could benefit from eliminating schools of education, close quote. That's Walter E. Williams. And one more, just on how great our public education system is. One more quote from Walter E. Williams. It's not in my package. But in other words, it basically said that more than 3/4 of black high school graduates could not do work at grade level, and the majority of college students, the majority of high school graduates can't do work at grade level, but it's even more pronounced for blacks. And even though I pointed out that we spend more per capita on education than any other country, we spend well above the international average in percentage of GDP on education. Education costs have risen tremendously over the past 48, 50 years, and that teacher salaries are well above the per capita income of the United States. The results are awful. These teachers are communist agitators, and they're using the kids as cannon fodder to fatten their pockets, to expand the control of their monopoly, and to implement their leftist agenda on the rest of the people. So whenever you hear these teachers talk about how they're underpaid, ask compared to what, and also ask yourself this question. If they're underpaid, why don't they go teach somewhere else? Why don't they go do something else? And the reality is because they won't get a better deal anywhere else than what they're doing at the moment. And what they're doing at the moment is a horrible job. They're doing an awful job educating our kids and preparing them for the future of leading our country and producing goods and services that people are willing to pay for. That's the Lord Gord Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment, share. Let's get this thing going. Get the Lord Gord Funk album, This Isn't TV, on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Tidal, YouTube. Share it with a friend, dance to it. Hey, let's spread this thing. Next week, I'm going to talk about Gulag Archipelago, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, some of my favorite passages from Gulag Archipelago. We're going to get into that, and that's going to be a good one. I'm Lord Gord. I'll talk to you next time.